Welcome to Secrets in the Shadows, where we uncover the darkest mysteries and unsolved cases that continue to haunt us. In today's story, we'll explore a terrifying chapter in American history, the Tylenol Murders of 1982. A crime so random and sinister that it changed the way we trust everyday products forever. Imagine a world where something as innocent as taking a pain reliever could turn deadly. In 1982, this unthinkable scenario became a chilling reality for 7 unsuspecting victims. This is the story of the Tylenol Murders. It was a typical Wednesday morning in Elk Grove Village, a quiet suburb of Chicago. Inside the Kellerman home, 12-year-old Mary woke up with a sore throat. Her parents, like any caring family, wanted to help her feel better. They reached for a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol, America's most trusted pain reliever. Mary swallowed the capsule without hesitation. After all, Tylenol was in every household, safe, effective, and relied upon by millions. But just hours later, tragedy struck. Mary collapsed suddenly, her parents rushing her to the hospital in a state of panic. Doctors were baffled. A healthy 12-year-old girl was now fighting for her life. Despite their best efforts, Mary was pronounced dead. Her death, though shocking, seemed isolated. For the moment, just miles away, 27-year-old Adam Janus, a postal worker and devoted family man, had the day off. Feeling under the weather, he reached for Tylenol to ease his discomfort. He took 2 capsules and lay down to rest. Moments later, Adam's wife found him on the floor, unresponsive. Adam was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to save him. But within hours, he was gone. His grieving family gathered at his home to console one another, unaware that the danger was far from over. In a tragic twist of fate, Adam's younger brother Stanley and his wife Teresa, overcome with grief, reached for the same bottle of Tylenol to relieve their stress-induced headaches. Unbeknownst to them, they had just ingested a deadly dose of potassium cyanide. Within hours, both Stanley and Teresa collapsed. Their deaths, just like Adam's, were swift and devastating. In the span of one day, the Janus family lost 3 beloved members. By now, whispers of a deadly pattern were beginning to emerge. A 12-year-old girl, a 27-year-old father, a grieving brother and his wife. 4 lives, seemingly unconnected, yet all stolen by the same silent killer. And this was only the beginning. Little did anyone know that more lives would be lost before the truth would even begin to surface. The bottles of Tylenol sitting on store shelves were no longer a symbol of relief, but a tool of death. At first, the authorities had no answers. 4 deaths, each equally horrifying, and no clear connection between them. What could be the cause? The answer wasn't clear to the doctors, the police, or anyone who could make sense of it. Was it an isolated incident, or was something darker at play? Then, just days after the deaths of the Janus family, reports began to surface. Another victim, a 35-year-old woman from the Chicago area who had also died after taking Tylenol. People began to question, could it be the Tylenol? How could a simple bottle of pain reliever, something so trusted by families everywhere, be involved in such unimaginable horror? The answer was becoming clear, but no one could yet fathom the full scale of the danger. By the weekend, panic had spread. Stores began pulling Tylenol from the shelves, but that was not enough to reassure the public. People were afraid to take their daily medications. The thought that a common, over-the-counter drug could be used as a weapon left the public gripped in terror. For families, it was no longer just about fear. It was about trust. Trust in the safety of the things they used every day. Trust in the very system designed to protect them. How could this happen? Who would want to poison innocent people? And more importantly, who was next? One by one, families started checking their medicine cabinets. They scrutinized every bottle of Tylenol in their homes. Was it safe? Was it lethal? What if someone they loved took a pill and they didn't know what was inside it? The very idea that something as harmless as a pill could hold such danger was too much to bear. Law enforcement scrambled to uncover any clues. Could there be a connection between these deaths? Investigators began to examine every detail: the victims' last movements, the specific Tylenol bottles they had consumed. The pressure was mounting to solve this case before more lives were lost. As the investigation into the Tylenol deaths deepened, the world watched in horror. The poison, potassium cyanide, had been added to capsules and bottles across the Chicago area. The idea that anyone could tamper with a product so widely used was chilling. How many bottles were out there, waiting for the next victim? Stores began pulling Tylenol from the shelves in an effort to contain the crisis, but the damage had already been done. The public's faith had been shattered. Across the nation, people began to panic. Tylenol was no longer just a brand, it was a symbol of fear. Parents, once confident in the safety of their homes, found themselves gripped by an overwhelming fear that never seemed to ease. Children who had taken Tylenol for everything from headaches to fevers were suddenly at risk. Trust had been broken. Lives were at stake. And in the wake of this uncertainty, the faces of families who had already been devastated by the deaths of loved ones hung in the air like a ghost. The pain was raw. Parents, relatives, and friends of the victims were left shattered, grappling with the unbearable reality that their loved ones had been taken so suddenly, and for reasons they could not understand. The mother of Mary Kellerman, the first victim, spoke to the press, her voice trembling as she begged for justice. She had lost her daughter to something she could never have prepared for. Her pain echoed the anguish of all the families affected by this tragedy. The loss was not just physical, it was emotional and psychological. They would never be the same. As investigators worked tirelessly to solve the case, it was clear that this wasn't just an accident. Someone had deliberately laced Tylenol bottles with cyanide. But who would do such a thing? And why? The investigation had become a race against time, with no answers in sight. Fear spread like wildfire. A nation paralyzed by uncertainty, unsure of who to trust or where to turn. The Tylenol murders had begun, and the world would never be the same. In the wake of the Tylenol murders, the nation's attention was fixed on one thing: finding the killer. Investigators across Chicago were thrust into a race against time, scrambling to piece together the scattered clues that might lead them to the truth. But the trail was cold, and the task seemed impossible. Who could be behind such a heinous crime? The first break in the case came from a chilling discovery. It wasn't just one bottle of Tylenol that had been tampered with. It was dozens, scattered across the region. Someone was methodically poisoning the medicine supply, slipping cyanide into capsules. And the worst part? These bottles were sitting on store shelves, waiting for the next victim. The poisoner had done the unthinkable, tampering with one of the most trusted, widely used brands in America. But the methods were careful and calculated. No one had seen it coming. Pharmacies were ground zero. Thousands of Tylenol bottles had been sold to unsuspecting customers, their contents now a ticking time bomb. The team of investigators began retracing every purchase, every sale. But the challenge was enormous. How could they find the needle in the haystack? Detectives fanned out, working with store owners and clerks, tracking down receipts and store logs. No one could say who had bought the deadly bottles. It felt like chasing shadows in a city filled with them. The breakthrough came when forensic scientists confirmed the presence of cyanide in the Tylenol capsules. Cyanide, the poison of choice for a murderer who had no fear of detection, who believed they could outsmart an entire nation. But even as the evidence mounted, no one could understand why anyone would do such a thing. The more they dug, the more chilling the reality became. There were no connections between the victims. They didn't know each other. They weren't related. They were simply victims of an unprovoked random attack. This was the work of someone who seemed to have no personal motive, no reason to choose these individuals. It was an act of pure malice. For the families of the victims, the investigation was a constant reminder of the irreplaceable loved ones they had lost. Mary Kellerman's parents, Adam Janus's widow, and the Janus family, All of them had been thrust into an unimaginable nightmare. They couldn't understand why their family members had been chosen. The pain of their loss was compounded by the agony of not knowing the truth. Who was responsible? And why were their loved ones taken from them? It was a move that shocked the business world. No company had ever made such a drastic and selfless decision before. The recall was massive, unprecedented, and while it cost the company millions, it also sent a powerful message to the public. Johnson & Johnson was not a company that would shy away from responsibility. They were willing to sacrifice their profits, their market share, and their reputation to protect the very people who had put their faith in them. For Burke and his team, the decision to recall every bottle of Tylenol was not just a financial one, it was deeply personal. They knew that in the aftermath of the tragedy, the public would not just remember the poisonings, they would remember how the company responded. The true test would not be in the profit margins, but in the trust they could rebuild. Could a company, in the face of such devastation, demonstrate the integrity needed to win back the hearts and minds of a terrified public? As the recall began, the public's reaction was one of disbelief and relief. On one hand, people were shaken by the scale of the crisis. Tylenol had been a part of their daily lives, a trusted remedy for aches and pains. And now, it was gone, removed from every store shelf, every medicine cabinet. The sight of empty aisles became a haunting reminder of the loss and fear. For families across the country, the recall meant more than just the inconvenience of finding a new brand. It was a moment of reckoning. Were they safe? Could they trust the products on their shelves again? Parents, who once relied on Tylenol to ease their children's fevers, were now filled with doubt. The emotional toll of the murders rippled across the nation. For the workers at Johnson & Johnson, the recall was not just a corporate decision. It was a devastating blow to their livelihoods. They had built careers within a company that had prided itself on safety and trust. Now they were left wondering what would come next. As the investigation into the Tylenol murders unfolded, law enforcement agencies faced immense pressure. The nation was gripped by fear, with every lead being pursued in the hopes that it might unravel the shocking case. One of the earliest and most chilling pieces of evidence came in the form of an extortion letter. The letter, which was sent to Johnson & Johnson just days after the poisonings, demanded $1 million to stop the killings. The sender claimed to have inside knowledge of the poisonings, further deepening the mystery. This led investigators to focus their attention on James W. Lewis, a man with a criminal history. Lewis was arrested for the extortion attempt and questioned extensively. But there was one major flaw in the investigation. There was no direct evidence linking him to the murders themselves. Despite this, his name would forever remain tied to the case, fueling ongoing speculation. But Lewis wasn't the only suspect. As the investigation progressed, several more theories emerged, each more unsettling than the last. Some theorized that after the initial poisonings, the idea of tampering with products might have inspired others to follow suit. Could there have been a copycat killer, someone who mimicked the Tylenol poisonings to gain attention or to cause fear? There were other isolated incidents of product tampering, but none of these were conclusively tied to the Tylenol murders, and the theory eventually fizzled out. Another line of thought was that the killer might have had inside knowledge of how Tylenol was manufactured. Was it possible that someone with access to the production facilities, an employee, contractor, or someone else with expertise, was behind the tampering? The idea of an insider committing the murders was chilling, but no evidence surfaced to support it. As the investigation continued, some speculated that the poisonings could have been part of a larger, more sinister pattern. Was this the work of a serial killer? The randomness of the poisonings, the lack of a clear motive, and the number of victims led some to consider that this could be the act of a psychotic individual targeting innocent strangers. But despite extensive profiling and investigations into serial killers, no connections to other known cases were ever made. There were also theories suggesting that the killer might have had a personal vendetta. Could it have been someone with a deep grudge, targeting the public or a specific group through these poisonings? This theory added a sense of fear, making people wonder if anyone could be next. But again, there was no clear evidence or identifiable target for such a personal attack. In the years after the Tylenol murders, one name resurfaced in connection with the case: Richard P., a convicted felon with a history of violent crime. Although no direct evidence tied him to the poisonings, his proximity to the Chicago area and past criminal behavior led investigators to take a closer look at him. However, as with all the other leads, nothing conclusive ever came to light. Could the killer have been a disgruntled employee at one of the stores where the poisoned Tylenol bottles were sold? Some investigators considered this possibility, suggesting that someone working in retail could have tampered with the products before they reached the shelves. Despite speculation, there was no solid evidence to support this theory, and it was eventually dismissed. At one point, a woman named Carolyn Duvall was suspected after reports emerged that she had been seen purchasing Tylenol capsules shortly before the poisonings began. The sudden suspicion cast a shadow of doubt over her, but after a thorough investigation, she was cleared of any involvement. Yet, her brief connection to the case left a lingering sense of unease. Another possibility was that someone with intimate knowledge of Tylenol's production process had been behind the tampering. Could a former or current employee of Johnson & Johnson, someone with direct access to the product, have committed these murders? While chilling, no evidence ever surfaced to link any employees to the poisonings, leaving this theory to haunt investigators as yet another unresolved lead. Some considered the terrifying idea that the poisonings could have been orchestrated by an unknown third party with no direct connection to any of the victims or the company. This theory proposed that the killer might have simply been acting out of pure malice or chaos. While frightening, this theory was never proven, and no one was ever able to pinpoint the identity of this supposed third party. Finally, one of the darkest theories suggested that the Tylenol killer may have been someone who reveled in causing panic and fear. A faceless, nameless individual whose only goal was to strike terror into the hearts of the public without any clear motive. The randomness of the poisonings made this theory particularly chilling, as it suggested that anyone, anywhere could be next. Despite all these theories and suspects, the investigation hit a dead end. The FBI conducted hundreds of interviews, analyzed mountains of evidence, and even received tips from across the country, but no breakthrough came. The extortion letter sent by James W. Lewis was the closest they came to a clear lead, yet it still didn't bring them any closer to understanding why someone would commit such a heinous act. After Lewis was convicted of the extortion attempt, but not the murders, the investigation stalled. As time passed, the search for the Tylenol killer grew colder, and the haunting question remained: who was responsible for these senseless deaths? Was it one of the suspects already named, or had the killer simply vanished into the shadows, never to be caught? If you found this case as chilling and haunting as we did, don't let the mystery end here. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Secrets in the Shadows for more deep dives into the world's most eerie and unsolved mysteries. Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind the shadows. And together, maybe we can finally solve what was once thought to be unsolvable. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because the truth is always lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered.